More than anything in life, I really just want to be heard. That's why I started writing. My first website was a journal on diaryland.com. I was 13, and I just wrote about my life, and I was a little bit surprised when I started getting readers. When you're hurting, you want people to hear you. In fact, I have this new theory that basically communication at all is needed because of suffering. If everybody was joyful, there would be no reason to talk. Just imagine if you're really happy and everybody around is really happy. What do you need to say? Like, communication is all about getting unmet needs met, and when your needs aren't met, you're experiencing a kind of suffering. Like when you don't feel accepted, when you don't feel loved, when you feel like other people don't care about you, your emotional needs aren't met, and so you want them to hear you. It kind of makes me wonder if what makes people even want to be a writer, which is what I've identified with for 16, 17 years. I've identified with being a writer, but what if what makes being a writer is basically not being able to get people to hear you any other way but writing? And so you're hurting and you're suffering and you just put it on paper, and if somebody finally hears you after you get it on paper, then it's like, oh, this is a way to get my need to be understood met. So right now my two husbands are asleep, and what I would really like to be doing right now is to be talking to one of them. So I'm experimenting with filming myself instead of doing that. And I used to write when nobody would hear me, when I had things on my mind and nobody would listen. I would write about it. And that was basically what made it through my teenage years. Just writing poetry and journal entries is kind of how I survived. Now it's I get eye strain if I try to sit at a computer and type in the middle of the night. I have various things that help with that. I take a supplement that helps with that. And I also have a special low blue light monitor, and I also have a special e-ink monitor. It's just hard to be in tune with my body and be typing late at night. One of my objections to the theory of the 5 love languages is that where in there becomes being heard, being seen, being felt by another person. Getting words of encouragement, or getting gifts, or receiving some sort of service, somebody doing dishes for me, being touched. And what's the 5th one? Anyway, point being, the 5 love languages come up with by Gary Chapman. Nowhere in there as it talks about being seen. Quality time's the other one. So in quality time could include, being seen and being felt, being understood by someone, or it could not. Is that your definition of quality time, or isn't it? And a service, it could be a service per se to listen to somebody, but I feel like my greatest love language really is to be seen, to be understood by people. And sort of the double-edged sword of creating anything. You create art, poetry, writing, videos. Anything I create, some people get it, but that's the rarity. And it's that with for everybody. Every creator goes through this, where some few people really get what you were trying to say. A lot of people, the majority of people, get something out of it. They get a benefit, or they get a new understanding or a new insight, but they don't get all of it, or they don't get it the way you meant it. And then another minority of people completely don't get it, and they actually hate your stuff. And then if you are famous enough, you develop a hate club of people who just can't stand your work, whether you're a musician or you're a writer. And for those people who really get your work, they're confused by the haters. They're like, how did those people not see you? And they can become your defenders, That's like the double-edged sword of being a creator. Just when you have this need, like I have this need, you just have to find a way to be heard. You have to find a medium, even if it's just like photography, just like any way to like put that thing inside of you out there. I guess my question is like, how much of that is just that, you know, I suffered in the past and I'm just trying to like hear myself talk about it through any medium, you know, hear myself sing about it, hear myself draw about it, you know, just trying to get it out. And if creation, if making art is basically a catharsis of letting something go, then that means the vast majority of art out there is pain. Exalted pain, beautiful pain, genius pain at times, talented pain, but still pain. Like, you just listen to song after song on the radio, it's like heartbreak, angst, suffering. You know, even the hopeful songs, you can't have hope without suffering, right? You don't need hope if there's no suffering. You don't hope for a better future, you live a good now, right? So when things are happy, right, it's not, for the most part, people who are happy don't need to create anything, it seems like. And that's really confusing as an artist, right? Because I love creation. I love everything I make. My creations are my darlings. They're my identity, my friends, they feel like my purpose. But it's confusing. Like, how can I have a purpose that is the expression of pain? Like, that in and of itself is painful. It's painful to think that the things I create are just me trying to get shit out of me. But not everything is like that. So that's what kind of confuses me, is that some things that people create, they create it because the process itself is joy for them. This is far the rarity. But when I created my coloring book, for example, Wayward Dreams, I created that coloring book because it was fun. I liked drawing undersea creatures. I liked the experience. I liked waking up in the morning and sitting down at my desk and saying, like, what undersea landscape am I going to draw now? Or what undersea creature am I going to draw now? Like, how can I draw a woman floating under the water? How can I combine a seahorse with an octopus to get, like, this fantasy creation? It was fun. But in a weird way, that makes it feel less meaningful. You know, my recipe books, believe it or not, come out of pain. They come out of the pain of suffering through stomach ulcers, through getting acid reflux every day, through losing my teenage years, losing my childhood to being sick. And when I started to discover a way to live that was healthier, that didn't hurt, then I started to create books, recipes, an entire website, a blog, a following, a mailing list. I started creating all this stuff all around healing. And it was all about getting out of pain. So it still came from pain, even though it was about the healing, about feeling better, about the relief. But even that still comes out of pain. I've never been super good at making friends. I'm a loyal friend. I'm an authentic friend. I'm an honest friend. I like to give gifts to my friends. I wish I had more friends to give Christmas gifts to. And yet I'm not super good at it. I'm really good at romantic relationships. I had my first serious love before I had my first friendship. When I was 13, I met a guy. I wasn't even really attracted to him, but I was so desperate for human connection. I kind of sort of fixated on sex as like a way to get connection, because I was 13 and I didn't know what real friendship was like, and I didn't know what it was like to be emotionally intimate with somebody. I didn't have a family member that I was close to in that way. And this guy started hitting on me one day, and I was like, oh, somebody's finally interested in me. And even though I kind of like didn't completely like him, I just started to like accept him on the premise that he was attracted to me. But I was very fortunate about what guy this was that was hitting on me, because as I got to know him better, he was actually capable of real vulnerability. And he shared with me what his nightmares were. He shared with me the sexual abuse that he had been through as a child. He shared with me who he really was. And through this level of intimacy, I started to learn what it meant to be close to somebody. We just sort of had this tacit agreement to never go to sleep on an argument. So we had arguments all the time, but we worked them out before we went to bed at night, over the phone or in person. I would sneak out of the house and I would walk to his house and, we would have sex. And then the really magical part was the hours after the sex. It really wasn't about the sex. It was just that the sex helped, us both open up emotionally and be there with each other, just be present. So because my first love and I had such a good relationship in terms of talking a lot and being really vulnerable and open with each other, I learned what real intimacy was like pretty young. And we were together on and off for a little over a year and a half. And 9 months of that time we actually lived together. But it's kind of another story as to how we ended up living together. But he ended up living with my family, basically. And by living together, I kind of had the experience of what it was like to be married, and all of a sudden what it was like to have a sibling, kind of simultaneously. I'd been an only child, and so I had those experiences, and I started learning about what it meant to be really close to someone. And this later kind of opened the door for polyamory, because when my first love broke up with me, God, I was so devastated. I would wake up every morning and my chest would just ache and ache and ache, and it would just, it would ache before I even remembered what it was aching about. I would just wake up in pain. I knew that I loved him, but after he left me, I redefined what love meant to me, that high level of attachment, and just having that attachment broken. And it was identity breaking to have somebody that I cared about that much suddenly gone, just leaving my life. So anyways, I thought polyamory is a way out of breakups, basically. That was my thought when I first discovered polyamory. I was you can fall in love with multiple people, you can not get in trouble for cheating, and you can not have breakups. And I thought, this is great. And I thought, I could never be alone. I could always have someone to talk to, always have somebody there for me in the middle of the night, like right now. Unfortunately, it doesn't work quite that nicely. You still can have breakups. In fact, I sort of almost had a boyfriend going on a few weeks ago. We didn't even get to the hot and juicy stuff. We had a few dates, some pretty platonic, casual dates, a kiss here and there. But I was really starting to get attached to this guy, and when he decided to break up with me, because he just decided he didn't really have time for relationships, he already had another girlfriend and he was trying polyamory, or he identifies as polyamorous, but in reality he doesn't have time for polyamory. What I learned through this experience of him, spending 3 Saturdays with me and spending a bunch of time with me on each of those Saturdays, was that I really just enjoyed having someone to talk to. I didn't really need a new sex partner. I actually was looking for friendship, and I just thought I was looking for a relationship. Now being 30, even being 28, a couple of years ago, I'm just starting to see more and more how it never was about the romantic part of it. It was about the intimacy. The question is why is it that so often we don't get really intimate with somebody emotionally until we've gotten intimate with them physically, especially for men, but this is also especially for me in particular. I've found that I try to get really emotionally intimate with people, but it's almost I don't know how until I've had sex with them. Lately, I've been becoming more like a typical normal woman, and feeling more I want to get to know somebody before having sex with them. I want to fall in love with them deeply and fully before having sex with them. I want to get all of my internal self really on board with it, so that no part of me feels like having sex is a violation of something inside me, which is definitely not something I took the time to do as a teenager. A lot of people are blaming technology for the lack of connection that so many people are experiencing. This epidemic of loneliness. I've always been lonely. My whole life's been lonely. and I've definitely am a millennial. When I turned 2000, I was 11. It's not the technology causing the loneliness. Technology is almost like the way people use technology is a symptom of the loneliness. You want something, you're craving something, so you reach for your phone. Now, I don't have a cell phone. I don't want a cell phone. But, if I feel lonely, I feel inclined to get on my computer, go check my OkCupid profile, or go check Facebook, or go check my emails, go write somebody. Because I'm trying to get a connection with a real human being. I'm trying to be understood, I'm trying to be seen, I'm trying to have a conversation, express myself, be stimulated, or at least be distracted from how I feel. Right? That's a symptom. The emotion is the cause, and then the technology it basically gives you a crutch that doesn't solve the problem. So basically, before we had social media, emails, and all that stuff, you had to actually call somebody and get, more live feedback from a real human being. And before phones, you had to actually go walk to somebody's house or go wake somebody up if it was the middle of the night in order to have a conversation. But it's like conversation itself is so underrated. Like, you think about school. Public education basically says you should sit here and listen to this adult who knows better instead of developing your social skills. What do kids want to do? They want to talk during class. They want to develop their social skills. It's like a natural, normal thing to want to talk to people. But all your childhood you're being told, shut up. Like, don't talk. Be less of a chatterbox. It's sad. Why are people in my generation so lonely? I think part of it is because the world in general has changed. College education is a joke. You could learn more from watching YouTube today. So why the heck would you put yourself in debt? My generation was not allowed to work at a reasonable age, at least in America. Like, you have to wait until you're 18 to get a real job, basically, or at least 16, depending on what state you're in and what the laws are or whatever. And it's like, when you hit puberty, like, you're physically ready to be an adult. Like, you're physically ready to take on real responsibilities. Like, all children want to do real things. They don't want to do, like, stupid things. Like, the only reason they want to do stupid things is because that's the only thing they're allowed to do. And so when they're told, that they're not allowed to talk, they're not allowed to express themselves, they're not allowed to be free, they're not allowed to have autonomy, they're not allowed to judge things for themselves, they're not allowed to have a real experience of life, like, all they're allowed to do is watch television, play video games, and go to school and do their homework, life becomes such a joke. And then all the things that all the adults are telling you are meaningful aren't. Maybe those things were meaningful when, my grandparents were growing up, but those things don't necessarily have relevance. I think a college education used to mean a lot more than in 50 years ago than it means today. I think even a high school education meant a lot more 50 years ago than it does today. I think it's harder to relate to the older generation now. I think my grandparents probably had a closer relationship with their grandparents than I ever had with my grandparents. What adults were doing was also more a part of the child's life. Like, when my parents were growing up, they were more involved with their parents' work. My mom had some involvement in my grandfather doing car repairs and carpentry and farm work, and my father had some involvement with the farm that his family ran. And also, square footage per person has increased in houses. Families used to have less rooms in the house and less space per person, which meant they were kind of on top of each other, and they didn't really have a way to just text somebody and get out of a full social engagement. So there was a lot more navigating of social things that you had to do. It also used to be that having a lot of kids meant more kids to work on the farm, because it used to be that like half of Americans were farmers. Now it's like 2% of Americans are farmers, or less, or something like that. People in my generation just don't buy it anymore. You can take your college degree and stuff it. Like, I'll go train myself. Like, you can take your idea of like what's socially appropriate or what a good culture is, and you can go stuff that too. I think being cut off from elders is just really hard. It's hard to have an identity that makes sense and that you understand when you can't, like, position yourself based on other people. when you know that they have a feeling about it, it makes it easier for you to figure out your feeling, like, in, you know, in proportion to that. Sorry, I'm rambling. It's 1:45 right now, and I'm just one of several billion people who wants to be heard. If you like listening to me talking about my opinions and the world, and mostly about myself and my opinions, then subscribe, like this video, go to my website, subscribe to my newsletter, go check out my board games, my coloring book, my recipe books, and everything else I've ever made, and, like, buy one of everything. Heck, buy 2 of everything and then give the other ones as gifts to somebody. And also share this video on your Facebook page. Why not, right? And I will take all of that you heard me, that you got it. Signing off.